Hi everyone, my name is Christina Givner. I am a speech language pathologist with the University of Miami. Part of my role with the University of Miami has been working with FAAST. FAAST stands for the Florida Alliance for Assistive Services and Technology. FAAST is Florida's state AT program, and I'm here today to talk with you about how communication is for everyone. So later on in this presentation, I'll go over what FAAST is and how we can essentially use communication for everyone, or how everyone is communicating, and what tools can we use to support and assist communication. Just to give you a little bit of background about myself, I'm a bilingual speech-language pathologist. I earned my undergraduate and graduate degrees from Florida State University. And my favorite thing about my job is that I get to support individuals that I work with to help them essentially find their voice. Their voice had a voice, but I'm helping them allow that voice to be heard, which is really, really important to me. Typically, I try to make this a very interactive presentation, but there are certain, limitations to doing a recorded presentation. With that said, though, I do want you all to reflect on what your experience with AAC looks like, what that role looks like, what the relationship looks like, and whether you've had mountains and mountains and ounces and tons of experience working with AAC, or whether you've never even heard of AAC or not even aware of what AAC is. I just want you to reflect on what that experience looks like, has looked like, and even potentially what you would like for that to look like. I want you to think of any specific tools or applications or devices that you've previously used. Think of ways that you've incorporated that have been very successful, or ways that maybe haven't been as successful as you would like, or it hasn't been as fruitful as you originally imagined. So think of it more as a way to reflect on what's worked, what hasn't worked, and what can we improve from here. My goal for today is to really just help you come into your own with AAC. I know I've mentioned AAC a lot, and I haven't really said what AAC stands for. So for anyone who doesn't know, AAC stands for Augmentative and Alternative Communication. With that said, these are some of the goals that I want us to target and go over today. I want you to become familiar with what FAAST is. I want you to learn how to familiarize yourself with different AAC devices and tools. I want you to know what is considered the right vocabulary, and I want us to talk about how to make AAC fun. Some things just to keep in mind: AAC and just assistive technology in general, it's this large, vast ocean of, tools and resources and knowledge. And the point of today is really just to kind of dip, not even a finger or not even a toe, but just a toenail into the AAC waters. And if I'm even being specific, we're not even dipping the big toe, we're dipping the pinky toenail in, just to get an idea about what AAC is and how we can use that to support individuals that we work with, and how to be good communication partners. All right, so what is FAAST? You've heard me talk about FAAST. You heard me mention that I work with FAAST. So again, FAAST stands for the Florida Alliance for Assistive Services and Technology. Every state and every territory within the United States has their own state AT program. Now, with that said, there are 12 regional demonstration centers scattered throughout the entire state of Florida, and those RDCs belong to FAAST. So keep in mind, I'm from Florida. I'm talking about FAAST. FAAST is Florida's state AT program. So those regional demonstration centers, or RDCs, are scattered throughout the entire state of Florida. At the University of Miami, we house 2 of them. We support the Broward Regional Demonstration Center, which supports Broward County, and we also support South Regional Demonstration Center, where we support Monroe County and Miami-Dade County. So keep in mind that typically there's a center in maybe one major city, and that center supports the bordering counties. Now, let's say you don't live in Florida. That's totally fine. As I mentioned, there are every state and every territory has their own AT program. So what you can do is you go to at3center.net and you can find your state's assistive technology program. It's really simple, it's really quick, it's really fast, and it's a really easy website to use. All right, so let's talk about FAAST. So FAAST offers 4 services at no cost. So They're free, they're at no cost. You don't have to have a prescription, you don't have to have a referral. Really, all you need is to make sure that you reside within Florida so I can help you. And sometimes, even if you don't reside in Florida, I can typically direct you where to go. But we have 4 services at no cost at the Regional Demonstration Center level. So those 4 services are information and assistance, assistive technology trainings, assistive technology demonstrations, and assistive technology loans. So information and assistance is where you might call me, ask me some questions about where you can purchase specific assistive technology tool, where you might be able to access and be evaluated for an AAC device, and really just any questions you might have about AT that you need support with those first steps in that guidance. We also have assistive technology demonstrations. What that looks like is if you are trying to troubleshoot a specific device or a specific program and you're not too certain about this one particular aspect of it, or you don't know how to hide or show a word, or you don't know how to edit a page, or you don't know how to program a button, or you don't know how to use a specific device, I can typically do a demonstration for you and show you how that device works. I do like to give the caveat that there is so much knowledge out there about assistive technology. And as much as I would say that I know it all, I do also understand that even my knowledge has limitations. But my goal is to, at least if I can't figure out the answer, direct you to someone who does. So at the very least, my goal is to help you find an answer. I will never leave you hanging. I will always help you find an answer if I don't know, or maybe I'm not as well versed. We also have assistive technology trainings, so much like what we're doing today. So long as there's an assistive technology component, I can support the training, or I can support the organization or the user, whoever it is that may be asking for this training. Think of trainings as ways to just become more familiar and feel more confident using AT, or assistive technology. So again, it could be about how to incorporate AAC into activities of daily living. It could be ways of, how we need to incorporate assistive technology into individualized education plans to support students who are entering that transition phase of their life. So there are multiple ways and multiple trainings that I can do to support you. Feel free to shoot me an email. I'll give you my information at the end of this, and I'll happily do a training for you guys. And then finally, the one that I would like to encourage everyone is our assistive technology loans. So the way our assistive technology loans work is it's a 30-day loan program where you borrow a device very similar to a library. You have it for 30 days, and at the end of those 30 days, you send it back to us. And really what the intention of this is to just bring about awareness that there is AT out there. And while it is very costly, you can trial out and try some of these devices before you make this costly purchase, because maybe you heard so-and-so uses a specific device, you use it, and maybe it didn't work for you in the same aspect, but that doesn't mean that there aren't other resources and there aren't other supports out there that you can also use. So do keep that in mind. There's this loan program. Essentially, you're using it for 30 days, you're borrowing this device. It is with the intention that you return the device back to us. But think of it as a library where you're checking out a book, you're checking out a device to see, do I like this? Is it going to be worth my purchase at the end of this trial visit? All right, so let's keep talking about FAAST. So the 4 previous services that I discussed with you are, again, at no cost, but those were at the Regional Demonstration Center level. Now, these 2 services are technically more at our headquarter level, and these typically do have a cost attached to them. So the first one I'm going to talk with you about is called AT Classifieds. AT Classifieds is very similar to a Facebook Marketplace, where you might be able to purchase a device that is gently used and or maybe no longer beneficial to the previous user, and you can purchase these devices typically at a discounted rate. Sometimes they're free, but typically they are discounted. Just like with Facebook Marketplace, you kind of have to just keep looking and seeing what is available, what's not. It changes on a daily, weekly basis. So just make sure you're consistently looking through AT Classifieds and seeing what is available and what might not be available, especially if you're looking for a very specific device. Make sure you keep your eyes open. And then we also have the financial loan program. And the way that it works, it's very similar to a bank loan, where you essentially loan out a certain amount of money with the intention that you do pay it back. So I can always give you the information on where to go for AT Classifieds and for that financial loan program. All right, so let's kind of get into the nitty-gritty of it. So my device has got the magic in it, and I really like to think of ways that these devices can be utilized for, again, communication purposes. So we have it divided into 3 categories. It is a low tech or no tech option, a mid tech option, and a high tech option. So low tech would be something that's similar to a picture exchange communication system where there really isn't much technology involved. There isn't much training typically involved, with the exception of PECs. But usually it's more of a very simple way of communicating, maybe potentially a communication board, just something that helps the user initiate that conversation, initiate that communication. And then we have a mid-tech. So for instance, a GoTalk, which kind of blends low tech and high tech together. So GoTalk has these templates that we interchange, but this one actually has this output, this verbal output that we can use, where you can record what each button is going to say, and then the individual can press that button and they have a voice. If they're not able to use their mouth to verbally create language, we can use these devices to create language. Finally, we have our high-tech device. So high-tech is similar to a tablet. It's similar to an iPad that you might use for communication purposes. What's really nice with these high-tech devices is that it allows for spontaneous, novel utterance generation. It allows for very robust vocabulary. They have opportunities to expand their language, and they're not essentially very dependent on partners to either create templates or to create icons or to create recordings for them. The device itself will do it on its own, and really all they need is training and guidance on how to use the device. All right, so I always like this as an idea. So let's go on a vacation. So if you're going on a vacation, how do you prepare for it? So you want to make sure that you have your tickets to go. You want to make sure that you have your itinerary ready to go. You want to make sure that you at least have a list of goals that you want to accomplish while you're there, or places you want to visit. AAC is really similar to going on vacation. I tell everyone all the time that, you don't go to the middle of France and all of a sudden you speak French. It's not how this works. And AAC is similar in that way. Just because you have a device in front of you doesn't necessarily mean that you can speak the language just yet. You really have to plan, set goals, immerse yourself into that culture, and learn about it before you can really implement it, or at least, have those considerations while you're implementing it. But how long is it going to take? So, we know that language does not develop just overnight. So just because I have this iPad in front of me with this amazing, wonderful system on it, doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to be able to create these beautiful sentences automatically. It takes time. It's the same way that children babble. You might have an individual that you're working with that they're just kind of perseverating, or it seems like perseverations, or selecting a bunch of buttons, what might feel like at random. But really what that individual is doing is they're just exploring that device and seeing what happens. So don't think of it as, they're playing with their device. No, they're exploring it the same way that a child might babble when they're creating language, ba ba ba, and or ma ma ma, and all of a sudden they see this response. Oh yeah, that's mama, and there's that meaning automatically attached to it. Exploring on the device is really similar. Maybe they pressed cookies and have a cookie right in front of me and can give them that cookie. Yeah, there's cookie, and all of a sudden there's that connection that's been made. So just as long as it takes for a child to learn language, sometimes verbally, it might take just as long for the child to use it using a device. So do keep that in mind, that this is not going to be an overnight process. Give yourself grace, give the user grace. Don't have this expectation that they're going to know this device like this. They have to learn. You have to model it for them. You have to be patient with them. You have to be patient with yourself, and just know that you need to be there as a form of support for them. You are part of their team, and you want to make sure that you're supporting them and helping them the best way that you can. So, there is no definitive timeline on when they'll be proficient or considered proficient in AAC. But we do see that there's these improvements and constant improvements in language when using AAC. So do keep that in mind. Maybe there isn't a definitive timeline, but there are improvements. All right, So let's get familiar. So how do we get familiar with these devices? I was talking to you about the importance of really immersing yourself into that culture and into AAC in general. One of the best things that you can do is, you want to learn about the features of the device that you are using or the AAC user that you're hanging out with or spending time with is using. You want to seek out training about the programming of your device. That's really important. If your device is sold by a specific vendor, you can always reach out to that vendor rep and see, hey, can you provide a training? Hey, can you support me? Definitely play around with the device when it arrives. If you are not the user yourself, but you have someone in your life who's using that device, make sure that you're not taking that device when they would essentially be using it. So my recommendation is if you're going to play around with the device, wait for them to be asleep, taking a nap, or during a time where they might not need that device, and you can play around with it, or you can always loan one out through FAAST, and that way you can play around with it. Another thing I would recommend is watch videos on how your device works. I would even recommend watching videos and listening to any type of podcast or reading blogs where users who actually use that device have created a blog or a video discussing their experience with the device and what ways that they've felt have been beneficial, so pros and cons with using the device. YouTube really is a great resource, so I would highly recommend looking up any videos that you can on AAC, but also making sure that you're watching content that was also created, not only by speech pathologists who have more of that technical understanding of these devices, but also individuals who are AAC users themselves and really have, that practice. So you have one aspect that's that theory of the practice, and then one that's actually that implementation of the practice and who's actually using it. So you kind of get that nice blend and that nice knowledge. All right, so do's and don'ts. Make sure you are trialing new and unknown AAC devices, but don't dismiss a new or unknown device just because you don't know it or you're not familiar with it. I hear it a lot of times where one therapist might recommend a very specific device because that is the only device that they know of, but they didn't trial out other systems. So they don't really know if this is the best device. Just they may have been successful with it, but is there another device where they might be even more successful and have a better chance at communication, or it provides them more of a least restrictive type of communication? Do be patient with learning the motor planning for different devices. There are different devices out there, and each device has their different motor planning. The same way that when you're texting on your phone, it's different than texting on your or communicating on your computer. The keyboard is completely different. I might be using my thumbs to text on my phone, but when I'm on my computer, I'm using all of my fingers. So keep that in mind, that the motor planning might be different based on the system. So you do have to be patient while you're developing that motor plan. And don't give up just because a motor plan doesn't make sense to you. A lot of times a device might not make sense to me, but it might make sense to the user. And it could be based in the motor plan, or it could be based in other things. But just because it's different than what I would expect or I'm used to doesn't necessarily mean that it would be different for the individual that I'm working with. So keep that in mind. Do recommend a device that is intuitive for your patient. And this kind of goes over the same thing. Don't recommend the same system over and over again just because you're familiar with it. We all have our comfort zones. We all have our preference. I am an Apple user through and through. And I would, definitely tell people, oh, Apple's great. I love Apple this, Apple that. But what if I have a user that, they're great with Android, or if a friend that's really great with Android and they want to use an Android phone? I'm not going to tell them, well, you have to get an Apple phone because Apple's really easy for me to use. Doesn't make sense. If it's not easy for them to use, then why would they purchase an Apple phone? If an Android or a Samsung is easier for them to use, then that's what they should use. So think of it more in that aspect. Just because it works for you doesn't mean it's going to work for the person down the street. Okay, but what about this vocabulary? I feel overwhelmed. How do I know what vocabulary to include? How do I know what vocabulary to take out? Do I have all the vocabulary there? What does it look like? What is AAC vocabulary? And sometimes it leaves us feeling, suspicious, stressed out. Usually it's that overwhelmed feeling of like, I don't know what to do. So there are different categories that vocabulary falls into, especially when you're using AAC. One of those are core words. So core words are vocabulary that make up a percentage of words that we use in our communication daily. They're present across all languages. They can be verbs, adjective, pronouns. They can be nouns. It's not typical. They're less likely to be nouns, but they can be nouns. So some examples of core words would be go, get, turn, on, off, up, down. And these are just ways that, these are just core words that you can use every day in your language and probably usually do. So I want you to think right now, you don't have to think of 3 sentences, but try to think of at least 2 ways to use the word turn. I'll give you like a couple seconds. Put some Jeopardy music in the background, the do, 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 do. All right, so when you're thinking of the word turn, you can create a sentence like, I turn on the lights, I turned around, it's my turn to play. And these are a lot of different ways that we can use the word turn, and it's in different contexts. So would you consider this a core word? I would. So I do consider turn a core word. So now let's see the other aspects. We talked about core words, and now we have our fringe words. So fringe words make up about 20% of our everyday language. Fringe vocabulary is really specific to a topic, an individual, or an environment. But they usually consist mostly of nouns. So person, places, things. Ideally, in the most perfect world possible, fringe words can and typically should, if possible, be used for low-tech, mid-tech, and high-tech systems. So some examples of fringe words are Domino's, Miami Heat, coffee, TikTok, elf. They're still important because they support and expand our language and our vocabulary. Sometimes there's this really heavy focus on solely core words because we create so many sentences just using core. And while that's important, fringe words typically add that, little spice to life. It adds that more specific aspect of language for that individual and really makes it more of, worthy, essentially makes communication fun and enjoyable and allows us to participate in more conversational volleys, I feel like, when we have those fringe words. All right, so how frequently throughout your day do you use the word botany? Personally, I usually only use the word botany when I'm doing this presentation. I've never really used it otherwise. Now think of how frequently throughout your day do you use the word want. For me, I use it pretty often. If I'm asking my husband, do you want chicken for dinner? Do you want ground turkey for dinner? I want to go to the movies. I want to see the movie Barbie, whatever it might be. But I usually can use the word want a lot more frequently than I can botany. So with that said, which one do you think is core and which one do you think is fringe? Personally, when I did this presentation, for me, want is a core word and botany is a fringe word. So now I created a sentence and I want you to see if you can pick out the core words. I finished my spaghetti. So in this sentence, I finished my would be the core words, and spaghetti would be the fringe word. Now for the sentence after that, the girl eats the Mickey Mouse ice cream. Mickey Mouse ice cream would technically be considered the fringe words. So do keep in mind that there are certain fringe words that for a person can be considered core words, and those are called personal core words. So what words might a baker need to use on an everyday basis? So maybe they need to use words like yeast, oven, rolling pin, batter, mixer, salt, whatever it might be that they need to bake with. But what words might a social media influencer use on an everyday basis? I guess it depends on the social media influencer, but I would think they need access to Instagram, ads, sponsorship, revenue, interactions, whatever social media influencers use for their language on an everyday basis. Now, think about that. Not a lot of words I used for baking, if any, crossed over with the words that I used for the social media influencer, but that doesn't mean that they're any less necessary. Some of these words are considered personal core words for those individuals. So think about what words in your life and in your career where you would need to include those personal core words, because my personal core words aren't going to be the same as someone who's a lawyer or someone who works as an architect. They're going to be completely different, but those words are needed so that I can complete my job, my career, my life, really. So do keep that in mind, that personal core words are important to have within the individual's device. All right, so usually I try to have you guys do it yourself. So I do want you to take some time and think, what kind of sentence can you make using only core words? So think about it. A good example that I usually get is, I want it. That is a whole sentence using only core words. When I ask them to make a sentence using only fringe words, it's not as easy, because typically you kind of have to either create this nonsensical question, essentially sentence, or you create one that's very, very niche. So if anyone is able to make a sentence using only fringe, please send that to me, because I would love to know and use that as an example. All right, so how do we kind of set this up? How do we figure this up, or figure this out rather? So there's a model created by Joy Zabala, and it's called the SET model. Typically, this is used for individuals and for students rather, who are about to have an evaluation conducted on them. I do like to adapt and use this model though for anyone, so not just students. I like it for any individuals, and I like it not only for evaluation purposes, but I like it for activities of daily living, so I can figure out what is it that we're doing and what is it this individual is trying to accomplish. How can I help them to the best of their ability? So the first S in SET, or individual, is what are the individual's strengths and weaknesses? So we're focusing first on the student or the individual, the S. And then we're focusing on the environment. In what type of environment or area are we targeting communication? Are we targeting language? Where are we essentially? And then comes a task. So what are the expectations for the individual in that moment? What is that individual trying to accomplish? And then finally, we have tool. So what devices, whether it be low tech, mid tech, or high tech, are being used to support this individual's language? So now I'm going to go through 3 case studies with you guys. The first one is with Joey from Friends. I tried to pick really familiar characters and individuals that people might be aware of and know. So hopefully you know who Joey is. If not, don't worry. I'll give you a little bit of a background now about Joey. So that was Joey. Joey loves food and his friends. So that's SET student, the individual, the S in SET. And then the environment, that E, is we're going to John's Pizzeria in NYC with his 5 friends. And then the expectations for the individual in the moment, so that task, the T, is for Joey to order his favorite pizza. And then the second T is that tool. So what device are we using? If it's low tech, high tech, mid tech, what tool are we using so we can support him? So we want to make sure that we're including both core and fringe words in his vocabulary that might be needed. So Joey uses Touch Chat Word Power 60. That's just the system he uses. It's okay if you're not familiar with it. Don't worry. It's one of our high-tech systems. So I want you to consider what core words would you include for Joey and what fringe words might you include for Joey. So at least core words, I would include can I get. Now here's where we run into a problem. If Joey goes up to the register and just says, can I get, they're not going to know what he wants to get. Yes, he can point. Yes, he can gesture. Yes, he can maybe just kind of look at them and try to see if they can figure it out. But we want to make sure that we have those fringe words included if possible. So maybe you want him to say, can I get 2 pizzas? Can I get the Joey special? Can I get a meatball sub? Whatever it might be, but we need to include those fringe words so that he can be independent and do it on his own without really relying on his friends to order his favorite meal. That's the whole point of assistive technology. It's to make the user independent so that they're not dependent on someone else. All right, so here's another case study. So this is my pal Snoopy. And again, if you don't know Snoopy, don't worry, I'll talk with you about him now. So Snoopy is the student, the individual. Snoopy loves to dance with his friends. So the environment that we're targeting communication is on stage for the after-school dance. And the expectations or the task at hand for Snoopy is for him to go up to Schroeder, his friend, to request for his favorite song. So Schroeder is a little boy that plays music, and Snoopy wants to go up to him and ask him for his favorite song. And then finally, we have the tool. So what tool is Snoopy using? Ideally, again, we want to make sure that we're including both core and fringe vocabulary on Snoopy's Go Talk 9 during the school activity. So he's using a Go Talk 9 Plus, which is typically a mid-tech tool. And we're going to just see what language and what core words and what fringe words we have for Snoopy. So we have a whole bunch of core words here. If you couldn't tell, majority of these, essentially all of them with the exception of one, are core words. Help, up, down, I want more on music, put like, or not music, sorry. I want more on put like it stop. Those are all core words. And the fringe word would be music. Now, keep in mind, this is a template. We can use different templates. We can even argue that you can make these phrases. So we can put, I want more, stop the music, I don't like music. I was trying to create it so that he can create different sentences like, I don't like it, or I like it, stop music, put on more music, put music up, put music down, I want help. So he can create a bunch of different sentences using these this vocabulary. Keep in mind also that there is no right or wrong answer per se. You don't have to use a template like this. You could have created more, you could have added more fringe words, less core words. It's really based on the individual. So it's important to use that set model because what might work for Snoopy isn't going to work for Joey, isn't going to work for our next case study. So think of it in that aspect where, not everyone is the same and the needs are not going to be the same. So take it more with a grain of salt and think of it more in the aspect of what does the student need or what does the individual need in that moment? All right, so now we have the world's greatest case study. So this is with Michael Scott. And again, if you're not familiar with Michael Scott, no worries. I'll go over him and what he likes. So this one I want you guys to do a little on your own. Just realize I put Snoopy. That's not Snoopy. That is Michael. My apologies to Michael. So let's talk about Michael. Michael's strengths and interests are his Dunder Mifflin employees. If you're not familiar with Michael, he's a character from a TV show called The Office, and he works at an organization called Dunder Mifflin, and it's about individuals in the workplace. So he really loves hanging out with his employees since he's the boss. So that's our student or our individual. Michael, and his strengths are that his interests really just, he loves working with his employees. So the environment that we're targeting communication is at his office, Dunder Mifflin in Scranton, their branch office. And the expectation, so the task at hand for this individual is for Michael to sit with his friends at lunch and even for him to maybe order food with them at lunch or tell them what he's eating at lunch. And then the device that we're going to be using is called LAMP Words for Life 84 Full. Again, you don't have to know the specific system, just know that this is a high-tech system. So we do have the ability to include core and fringe words. Excuse me. So let's talk about what core words would you include for Michael and what fringe words might you include for Michael. So I'll give you guys some time to think about it. Again, the setting that we're doing this is at lunch. So he might be ordering food. He might be wanting to sit with his friends. He might be wanting them to sit next to him. So what core words would you use? What fringe words? And even think, are there any personal core words we can potentially add in? Play some Jeopardy music again. Do, 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 do. I'll just go to the next slide. All right, so what core words would you include for Michael? What fringe words would you include for Michael? At least core words, I would include, I want to eat with you. And that is a complete core word sentence without any fringe words. And it works great, but maybe he wants to eat pizza with him. Maybe he wants to eat rigatoni with him. Maybe he wants to be really specific and he doesn't want to sit with his friend Dwight. So he wants to say, I want to eat lunch with Jim today. And he doesn't want to eat lunch with Pam today. So we might have to even add in those personal core words of his coworkers, Jim, Pam, and Dwight, so he can request to sit with them. So keep in mind, it is based on each individual, their strengths, their strengths, their interests, and what task is at hand, and what tool are they using, and how can we support them with that tool. How do we do it? So we had this set model set up, but what does that implementation actually look like? How can we implement it? So first of all, we have to make it fun. I like to say that maybe I'm not a speech and language therapist. Maybe I'm more of a communication therapist. My goal is to teach communication. And one of the only ways to get someone to communicate with you is to make sure you're having fun. Because think about it, when you're with someone who you can't hold a conversation with, you're not really enjoying yourself. You're just trying to think of ways, how can I get out of this? So we want to make communication enjoyable and fun and keep those conversational volleys going. I want to be interesting. I want to make sure that this person that I'm working with is having fun and feels motivated and feels like they want to continue the conversation with me. Because if not, they're just kind of check out. And why are they going to keep having a conversation with me if they're not enjoying themselves? So ways to do that are just to make sure that you're including high interest activities and making sure that you're following the individual's lead. Sometimes it's hard because you just want to take control, but in those moments, give yourself grace, take a step back, observe the environment, see what this individual is leaning towards and going towards, and then just try to adapt your session or adapt your conversational volley with this person based on their interests. So there is a feature on, I believe, every high-tech device where you can hide some of these words. So what you're seeing on the left side is a system called LAMP, and it has 84 buttons, and these are all the 84 buttons visible. Now, what you're seeing on the right side is that I hid majority of those buttons with the exception of 4, and it's finished, my, go, and more. Now, the reason why I did this is for any person, regardless of who they are, that is very overwhelming when you see 84 buttons. So to help them learn the device, or to help them maybe not feel as overwhelmed, we might hide some of the vocabulary, not because we're trying to stop them from persevering on a word. If you're working with someone and they're just persevering on the word cookie, I'm not going to hide it just to keep them quiet. That's equivalent to me duct taping their mouth, essentially. I'm not just going to stop or hide the word because it's annoying to me. I'm going to figure out how to redirect and finish therapy, but I'm not going to hide the word just for the sake of hiding it. If I'm hiding words on their device, it's more so for educational purposes and to teach the individual how to use the device in a less overwhelming manner. Now, what you can do is you can hide the words when you're in session, and then when they're out of session, you can show them again. So they still have access to the complete vocabulary, but maybe I'm trying to target a specific word during our session, and I just want to focus on that area of language. And it's really up to you and the user and the AAC users team what works best for that individual. But what I would like to say and what I would like to reiterate is don't hide a word just because they're persevering on that word and it's, for lack of a better words, maybe annoying you. If they're just saying the same word over and over again, you have to treat it the same way that you would work with an individual who's saying the same word over and over and over again. You wouldn't duct tape their mouth shut. And that's what essentially you're doing if you hide that word just to kind of keep them quiet. So do think of that. What I will also say is I didn't edit the page. What I did was I hid the words. So every icon is in that same exact location, but some are hidden and some are shown. So I never clicked the word edit. All I did was hide the words or show them. So the best way, again, to keep these individuals, interacting with you and to keep it fun is make sure it's motivating. If the motivating factor is you leaving, target the word go or target the words go away. I've done that in session where they'll tell me go away and I'm running out of the room and then I come back and then they tell me again, go away. And then I run out and I come back. But the motivating factor is me leaving. So I'm going to use that to the best of my ability. If the motivating factor is you taking off your shoes, I'm going to take my shoes off and we're going to practice the word off and then maybe I'll put it back on. Sometimes I'll model for them. Usually when we're starting, I'll usually model for them without the expectation of them actually activating any button on the device. I'm just going to model, and then maybe increase my wait time to see if they take interest and they want to participate. But I want to find what's fun and what's motivating for that person. What I will say is sometimes therapists do use food because food is motivating for anyone. Food's motivating for me. But if you're working with someone and you're giving them goldfish and they ask for snack, cracker, goldfish, whatever the target word is, don't just give them one goldfish. Reward them as you would like, oh, here's your snack. Here's your snack of goldfish. And then if they want more after that, they can request for more, but don't essentially train them to constantly request for one. It's food. They're humans. We want to make sure we're treating people with respect. So make sure if someone asks for goldfish or snack, you're actually giving them a handful of a snack or a proper snack and not just limiting it to one by one by one. Also keep in mind, we're not drilling here. Communication is supposed to be fun. It's essential. It's not supposed to be, what's this? What's this? What's that? What's this? We're not asking them to label items in the environment. What we're doing is communicating with them. So it's not of, oh, tell me what this is. Tell me what this is. It's more of, oh, I see a dog. That's a fun dog. Maybe I'm modeling it for them, but I'm not requesting or telling them to tell me what they see because that's not communication. It's just drilling. And remember, no one wants to be bombarded with questions. Relax, enjoy the process. Think of times when you've just been bombarded with questions and you just want it to stop. A lot of times, these individuals that we're working with, they're being quizzed and drilled and bombarded with questions on a daily basis. So let's be that, fresh of, a breath of fresh air and help them relax and enjoy the process and make it more fun and relaxing and not this stressful, overwhelming environment. Another big thing is how to be a good communication partner. Like I said, I like to think of myself as a communication therapist and not a speech and language therapist. So you always want to presume competence when you're working with any AAC user. And here's why. A lot of times, some of these users don't communicate in the same ways that we do. So they're not verbally communicating, but that doesn't mean that they don't have the ability to communicate, nor are they not intelligent enough to communicate. I want to presume competence. I always want to make sure I'm giving them maybe the most, not challenging, but maybe a more difficult or more higher level device than someone else might offer them, because I want to make sure that I'm presuming competence, presuming this person's ability. I don't know what this person's capable of if they've never had the appropriate tool in front of them. So think of it in that aspect. We don't know what they're capable of if they've never had the tool in front of them. You want to present models. Again, this is a really new, overwhelming learning experience. So make sure you're presenting models for the AAC user so they can learn by example. A lot of times when I'm starting out, I'm not anticipating this person to touch the device, to activate the device. I might just be modeling for one whole entire session. And then the next session, they're ready to go. And that's fine. And they're activating it. But sometimes we just need a model, and then they can start activating the system. I also want you to allow pauses. So give those pauses for them to process what's being asked of them so that they can have opportunities. Don't just jump right in and show them, oh, this is what you do, this is what you do, this is what you do. So make sure you are allowing for those pauses as well. With that said, you allow those pauses. Sometimes you need a prompt when needed, but try not to give the most direct prompt first. Try to see if you can give maybe a little gestural prompt. So you point to it. Maybe you give a little tactile prompt. So you touch their elbow, guide them a little bit to it. So give them as little support as you can from the start, but you're still prompting them and helping them. But you want to make them independent communicators and not dependent on the user. And provide consistent responses, provide consistent feedback, and make sure it's interactive and engaging activities. Throw that big party when they actually say what it is that they want to say. I was working with someone the other day that for the first time, this individual created a whole sentence because I was trying to read a story with them. And the individual said, book stop, bubbles go. And that was the most beautiful sentence, the most excited I ever got, because I knew exactly what they were asking me to do. I threw that book away, grabbed the bubbles, and we played with the bubbles. But it was because that's what the individual wanted to do. He wanted to interact. He wanted to engage. So really focus on that AAC user. And then finally, who can use AAC? Anyone and everyone. There is no age that's too old, and there is no age that's too young. And there are absolutely no prerequisites or skills that need to be mastered before you use AAC. So, and no, you do not need to master low tech to move to mid tech to move to high tech. That's not how it works. It's the same way that someone might prefer using the Alexa to turn on the lights, to switching a light switch on, choosing the clapper to turn on the lights. It's more based on user preference. But there are no prerequisites. That is probably one of the things I will stress the most, is that there is no age limit. There are no prerequisites. All it needs to be is someone who wants to communicate and is ready to go. That's really all that we need. There is no prerequisite or skill set that that individual has to have or be considered mastered to use AAC. If someone isn't able to communicate in the manner that we would maybe potentially expect them to, and they are trying to communicate, that's more than enough. So think about it in that way. There is no prerequisite. Anyone is eligible. Everyone, the moment you were born, you're eligible for AAC. So usually this is when I ask for questions or any comments, but what I am going to invite you to do is, if you do have any questions or any comments, please feel free to get in touch with me. So you can send me an email at C as in cat, X as in X-ray, G as in gorilla, 907@med.miami.edu, or you can leave me a voicemail at 305-243-5706. I'm going to encourage that if you call that phone number, please leave me a voicemail. I am not typically near my phone, so I don't always, I will say, like, it's very rare that I am able to answer that phone. So please, please, please leave me a voicemail if you're going to call the number, or if not, please feel free to email me and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Thank you guys so much for attending this presentation. I hope it helped you feel a little bit more confident in your skills, and I hope you understand some major takeaways. It's just that AAC is for anyone and everyone, and it's supposed to be fun and enjoyable, and I'm here to help and will happily help. So thank you guys, and I'm really excited to see where AAC will take you down the line.